What's up, friends? Thank you for tuning in. Today we are sketching a motorcycle, and our guest bike today is a 2020 BMW S1000RR. Let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing that we will want to block in is our ground line. Okay, so again, let's kind of like so. Now this particular bike is going to be up on a little jack, so the rear end will have a bit more angle to it. Maybe something like this. And so let's say that the center of the rear wheel is about here and it's slightly off the ground. So let's say, here we are, rear wheel, rear tire. Now the bike, generally a sport bike is going to be about 1.5 wheels long, right, the wheelbase. So let's go 1, right, and a half is maybe about here, okay? So let's ghost in a guideline. Let's put that front wheel on the ground, nice and large, like so. Okay, so that's roughly well, this might be a little bit big. Okay, it's not quite 1.5, so this might actually be a little bit too compressed. But I can change that by just moving this front wheel forward a little bit. So let's give ourselves a little bit more room. And this one doesn't have to be the cleanest sketch. Unfortunately, I would like it to be, but sometimes you just gotta roll with it, no pun intended. Okay, but I'm trying to draw nice and light so that we have room to kind of mask some of these working lines later. One of the key points, we wanna go through and create some guidelines for ourselves to make sure that we're getting proportions correct and putting things in the right location. And to this distance, one wheel here, here's a second wheel. Vehicle generally at the top of the windshield is going to be a little bit less than 2 wheels high. So 1.5 wheels long, 1.5, 1 3/4 wheels high. And a really important part of the geometry, I'm going to put in the disc brake and find the center of the wheel. Let's call it here. Important part of the geometry is, where the grips are. All right, so let's create the trail angle. Trail angle on a sport bike is pretty steep, and the grips are going to usually be, not always, but about at the rear of the front wheel, front tire. Okay, so we've got that hard point blocked in there, and then the grips will come out like so. You've got put a little circle in there, and this line here, center line to center line of the rear tire, oftentimes you'll see the crankshaft or the center of the motor be in line with this line. On this BMW, the engine actually sits, it's about at the center of the 2 wheels, so it's about here, but it's a little above this line, right? So I believe it's an inline 4-cylinder, puts out over 200 horsepower and 80 foot-pounds of torque, a little over 80 actually. And it's slanted forward. Now we won't see all of this, it'll be shrouded in fairing, but we at least want to know where things are so that we can place them properly. Now the center of the crank and the center of the mount point for the swing arm are in line, just about in line on this S1000. So it's a little bit in front of the wheel, so let's place it a moment here. And then your front sprocket it's on a little bit of an angle. So there's an angle here, and the front sprocket is around here. Again, shrouded with some fairing pieces, but we want to know where all these geometry parts are, where all these mechanisms are, because it's super important, right? When drawing a bike to make it believable, we need to know where all of these, right, the mechanics have to be real. So there's our There's our chain, and then our swing arm will be built off of this. Now, the tank, the end of the back of the tank, is just behind our swing arm mount point, so we'll create a guideline there so that we know where that's supposed to be placed. We'll figure out the height here in a moment. The rear panel, or the tail, ends a little bit before the rear of the back of the rear tire. And again, this bike is on a little bit of an angle, so it's actually going to be a bit higher than it might be if it were not on this little jack stand. And the front is probably, at a third way, at the first third of the front tire. Okay, so now we have some of our key markers here. Let's take a sip of coffee or tea. And get into this sketch. You want to wash down your tea to keep the acidity levels in your mouth low so you don't get cavities. Okay. I'm going to fast forward through the next section as I just start to place things. Obviously, if you have any questions, leave a comment. I'm happy to come back in and answer those questions at some point in another video or in the comments. Okay, so at this point I have the majority of the parts kind of blocked in. I think the tail might be a little bit too thick and stubby. There are some things that aren't quite proper, but I'm going to, from here, just go through and detail certain things out, make adjustments as I can. And again, in the side view on a motorcycle, you can see the majority of the bike, so it's a really important view when designing motorcycles. Same with the car, right? All your proportions and relationships are established in your side view, and even more so in a bike because they're so much thinner, so you see much more of the bike than you do a car in a side view. But again, same principles apply. All your proportions and relationships are established here, and I think I've gotten the majority of them fairly correct. Not bad for a first pass. Again, I might kind of elongate this a little bit, let this breathe, and as I finish this up, we'll see this particular relationship between the tire and the top of this fairing. I don't know if I've nailed that quite right. A lot of these fairings have some pretty intricate geometries and relationships, so this is really a fun one to study. And I'm going to go back into fast forward mode. See you in a second. Okay, so as I continue to detail this out, I'm not going to capture all of the minute details. You can just noodle on this thing forever and get lost in all these little mechanical parts. So I'm just going to block in a lot of these spaces with some hatching to really let the fairing start to jump off of the page a bit. And again, I have a reference photo, so some of the details are hard for me to see, especially on the lower portion as you get into shadow here. So I'm kind of making up some of those details. In certain relationships, I think got a little compressed through here, but overall, I'm happy with how the sketch is turning out. But again, I'm not going to get caught up in all of the engine detail and that type of thing. You can if you like, but I am going to choose not to. All right, so I think that we've got the majority of this bike kind of blocked in. There you could sit here and noodle on this for a very long time, and I could probably overlay this and might extend this tank a little bit, let that tank breathe just a smidge, just a little bit short. Maybe this rear wheel could be a little bit bigger, but I think generally we've got most of the bike here. It's pretty close. Again, there are folks that went through and spent thousands of hours designing all these little components and engine cladding pieces and this type of thing that unfortunately I've just kind of glanced over, but you know, you could really get deep into the details and into the weeds on these as much as you'd like. But I think that what we've done here today is capture at least the gesture, the essence of the S1000, and I think we've done it justice for the most part. Again, part of being an industrial designer is to critique your work and understand that there's always room for improvement. So that's the case with this sketch for sure. There's certainly room for improvement, but I think we took a good stab at it. Again, leave a comment if you have any questions. If you'd like to see different parts of the process or anything like that. I may go into Photoshop and just push and pull a couple things, but I might not also. I might leave it as it is just to keep the integrity of the sketch and really just show the process that I've gone through here. But again, if you found any value, leave a like, subscribe, and I will try to get one of these videos up each week. Let me know if there's something that you'd like to see specifically. I'm happy to walk through that. And until next time, stay safe, take care, and sketch on.